Frozen, disgraced, and out of options, a Philadelphia nurse meets a millionaire rancher in a blizzard rescue or ruin. When kindness carries her across the street and into a new life, what secrets, dangers, and desires will surface at Starfall? Ranch in which promise will cost them everything before mercy runs completely out. The wind in Wyoming Territory during the winter of 1887 was not merely cold. It was a living entity. A predator that howled with a voice of shattered glass and hunted the warmth from any living thing. It was my stalker that December night in Cheyenne, its icy talons slipping through the threadbare wool of my shawl, seeking the very marrow in my bones. I sat on a hard, unforgiving bench in the lonesome train station, a place that felt like the final outpost at the edge of the world. Each breath I exhaled was a ghost of myself, a plume of white vapor that dissolved into the frigid air. A testament to the life that still flickered within me. My hands tucked under my arms for a pathetic semblance of warmth were numb foreign things I could no longer feel. In my small leather satchel beside me rested the entirety of my existence. $3 a photograph of my parents, its corners soft with time, and a heart so full of frozen dreams it felt as brittle as a shard of ice. My name is Eleanor Vance, though most who knew me called me Ellie, and I was beginning to believe this desolate station would be my final resting place. Just months ago, I had been a nurse in a bustling Philadelphia charity hospital. My world had been one of starch-white aprons, the scent of carbolic acid, and the quiet satisfaction of easing pain. I knew how to set a bone, how to soothe a fevered brow, how to deliver a new life into the world, and how to hold the hand of another as they departed it. My life had purpose. It had order. Until Dr. Alistair Finch, a man whose reputation was as polished as his spectacles, and whose soul was as black as coal tar, decided that I was his for the taking. The memory was a raw, festering wound, his cloying breath the glint of entitlement in his eyes, the brutal strength in his hands as he cornered me in the linen closet. But I was not some wilting flower. I was a fighter. The iron bedpan I grabbed had connected with the bridge of his nose with a sickening crunch. It was a moment of pure righteous victory, a victory that cost me everything. No one believed me. My word, the word of a mere nurse against that of a respected physician. The hospital board dismissed me for violent hysterics and moral turpitude. The lie spread like a plague through the medical community. Doors were slammed in my face. Friends averted their gaze. So I had fled, purchasing a one-way ticket west, chasing a desperate whisper of a hope that in the untamed territories a woman's skill might matter more than the slander attached to her name. But my money had bled away, vanishing at each stop until Cheyenne became the end of the line. The boarding house owner had looked at me with pity, but pity doesn't pay for a room. Now the last train east was a distant memory, and the next, if it could even fight its way through the blizzard, wouldn't arrive until dawn. If I survived until dawn, I pulled my shawl tighter, a futile gesture. A profound, soul-deep weariness settled over me. Perhaps it was better this way. A quiet, frozen end was perhaps more merciful than what I had endured. It was then, through the swirling curtain of snow, that I heard it, the rhythmic crunch of horse hooves on the frozen earth. A figure emerged from the blizzard, a silhouette of power and substance, astride a magnificent black stallion that seemed carved from the night itself. The man was large, wrapped in a heavy shearling-lined coat, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the relentless wind. He dismounted with a fluid grace, tying his horse to the hitching post before striding toward the station door. Even in my dazed state, I noted the details, the expensive cut of his leather boots, the confident, unhurried gait of a man who was the master of his own world. When he pushed the door open, a vortex of wind and snow swept in with him, and I flinched. He pulled the door shut, plunging the small waiting room back into its relative quiet. He stomped the snow from his boots and turned his eyes, immediately finding me in the dim lantern light. "Evening, ma'am," he said, his voice a low resonant baritone that seemed to vibrate in the frigid air. It was a voice imbued with a warmth that the room sorely lacked, touched with the faint pleasant drawl of the southern plains. He touched the brim of his hat, a gesture of innate courtesy. "It's a merciless night to be waiting for a train." I tried to answer, to form a simple pleasantry, but my jaw was locked, my teeth chattering like frantic castanets. All I could manage was a short, sharp nod, a movement that felt jarringly violent in my frozen body. He moved closer, his gaze sweeping over me, taking in my worn but respectable dress, my thin shawl, and the professional leather medical bag beside me. His eyes were dark and intelligent, set in a face weathered by sun and wind. But it was a kind face, etched with lines of concern, not judgment. He was perhaps 30 with dark, thick hair and a neatly trimmed mustache. "My name is Sterling Monroe," he offered, pulling off his thick leather gloves and tucking them into his coat pocket. "I own the Starfall ranch about 20 miles north of here. I was in town on business heading home when I saw the light on in the station." His eyes paused on my satchel. "Forgive me for asking, ma'am, but are you a physician?" The question jolted me. "Nurse," I managed to stammer the single word, a painful exertion. "Eleanor Vance, from Philadelphia." A flicker of surprise, then profound interest crossed his features. A trained nurse. In this part of the country, such a thing was rarer than a gold nugget in a stream. "Miss Vance," he said, his tone shifting from polite to urgently concerned. "You can't stay here. You'll freeze solid before the sun comes up. This storm is only getting worse, and this station offers no real shelter." He took another step closer. "Please allow me to take you somewhere warm. A hotel, at least." A swell of hope so sharp it was painful rose in my chest, only to be immediately crushed by the bitter reality of my situation. I had learned the hard way not to trust the easy kindness of men. Men like Sterling Monroe, men of means and power, always wanted something in return. Yet looking into his steady, compassionate gaze, I saw none of the predatory glint I'd seen in Dr. Finch's eyes. Still, the shame was a physical weight. I have no money for a hotel," I confessed, my voice a raw, broken whisper that was nearly stolen by the wind rattling the window panes. "That is the last thing you need to concern yourself with right now," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. He moved with sudden purpose, shrugging out of his immense coat. The scent of worn leather pine and clean winter air enveloped me as he wrapped the heavy garment around my shoulders. The residual warmth of his body was a shocking, glorious thing. It seeped into my chilled skin, and I gasped a ragged, involuntary sound of pure relief. For a moment, my trembling subsided. "Can you stand?" he asked gently. I tried. I pushed my hands against the bench, but my legs were logs unresponsive and stiff with cold. I swayed, and before I could fall, he was there. Without a word of hesitation, he scooped me into his arms. My medical bag was somehow gathered up with me. I was shockingly light, a bundle of bones and frozen fabric. He held me as if I weighed nothing at all, his arms a fortress of strength and warmth. "The Cattleman's Hotel is just across the street," he said, his voice a low rumble against my ear. "We'll get you warm, get some hot food into you, and then, if you're up to it, you can tell me what brings a nurse from Philadelphia to a frozen train station in the middle of a Wyoming blizzard." As he carried me out into the storm's fury, I pressed my face against the rough wool of his shirt, instinctively seeking shelter. The wind tore at us, but his hold was unwavering. For the first time in so many months, a feeling I had thought long dead flickered within me, a fragile, tentative sense of safety. I didn't know this man. I didn't know his true intentions. But as he carried me through the blinding snow, his strength a shield against the world, I found myself doing the one thing I had sworn I would never do again. I began to trust. The lobby of the Cattleman's Hotel was an oasis of warmth and golden light, a stark contrast to the howling wilderness outside. As Sterling Monroe strode through the doors, carrying me, every head turned. A murmur rippled through the collection of ranchers, merchants, and travelers gathered in the plush armchairs. I felt a hot flush of shame creep up my neck. To be seen like this, a half-frozen waif carried in the arms of a man like him, was to be instantly judged, my story written for me by speculative whispers. A thin, perpetually anxious-looking man. The desk clerk hurried toward us. "Mr. Monroe, good heavens, what's happened, Mr.?" Abernathy Sterling's voice was calm but commanded immediate action. "I found this young lady at the train station. She's nearly frozen through. I need your finest room, and I want hot broth coffee and a pile of your thickest blankets sent up immediately. And see if Doc Williams is in town. Have him called." "Of course, sir, right away," Abernathy said, fumbling for a key. "Room 12, top of the stairs. Shall I send for someone to assist you? I have her?" Sterling replied, his tone dismissing the offer as he started for the grand staircase. I was acutely aware of the stares following us, of the whispers that were surely painting me as a fallen woman, but the profound cold was now being replaced by a painful prickling sensation in my fingers and toes as feeling began to return, and I was too consumed by the agony to care about my reputation. Sterling carried me into a room that was larger than any I had ever slept in. A fire was already laid in the hearth, and he set me down gently in a velvet-upholstered armchair before immediately crouching to light it. The flames caught quickly, their cheerful crackle a song of hope. The hotel will send a maid with some dry clothes, he said his back to me as he expertly coaxed the fire to life. We must get you out of those damp things. A knock at the door announced the arrival of a young bellboy with a tray laden with a tureen of steaming soup, a pot of coffee, and a stack of woolen blankets. Sterling pressed a coin into the boy's hand that made his eyes widen, then closed the door. He poured a cup of coffee, his large, capable hands moving with surprising gentleness, and brought it to me. Drink this, he commanded softly. Slowly. Too much heat too quickly can be a shock to the system. He draped one of the thick blankets over my shoulders, tucking it around me. I wrapped my numb fingers around the warm porcelain, the heat a blessed relief. I sipped the coffee, feeling its warmth spread like a sunrise through my chest. My shivering began to subside. You seem to have some medical knowledge yourself, Mr. Monroe. He gave a small, wry smile, pulling up another chair to sit opposite me. A man learns a thing or two running a large ranch. We get all manner of injuries, and the nearest doctor is often a day's ride away. But I'm no trained professional. He leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. What brought you this far west, Miss Vance? If you don't mind my asking. I studied his face in the flickering firelight. He had honest eyes. That was the thought that came to me clear and certain. After the charity he had shown me a complete stranger, I owed him at least a part of the truth. I was a nurse at a hospital in Philadelphia. I began, my voice steadier now. There was an incident. A doctor who refused to accept no for an answer. Sterling's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping along his cheek. I saw a dangerous flash of anger in his dark eyes. He laid his hands on you, he asked, his voice a low growl. He tried. I clarified, a flicker of my old defiance returning. I broke his nose with an iron bedpan. Despite the gravity of the topic, the corner of Sterling's mouth twitched. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Good for you, he said, the approval in his voice genuine. I hope it was a painful lesson. It was, I affirmed, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I almost smiled back. But it cost me my career, my reputation. I hoped that out here in the West, where skills are said to matter more than gossip, my past wouldn't follow me. It won't, Sterling said with absolute certainty. We judge people by what they do, Miss Vance, not by the lies whispered about them in the East. A woman with your training is worth her weight in gold in this territory. Another knock at the door interrupted us. A hotel maid entered, her arms filled with women's clothing. Begging your pardon, sir, she said, curtsying. These are from Mrs. Patterson in room 8. She said any woman caught in a storm like this deserves what help can be offered. Thank Mrs. Patterson for her generosity, Sterling said, rising to his feet. I'll wait for you downstairs in the dining room, Miss Vance. Take your time. Get warm. He walked to the door, then paused, his hand on the knob. Mr. Monroe, I called out, my voice still small. Why are you doing all of this? You don't know me. He turned, his gaze meeting mine across the room. The firelight played on the strong planes of his face, making him seem both powerful and profoundly kind. Perhaps it's because I know what it's like to feel utterly alone in the world, he said quietly. And perhaps it's because I've been praying for someone exactly like you to come to Wyoming. My breath caught. Someone like me. A healer. He clarified, his eyes intense. My ranch hands are good men, but they're hard on themselves. I've lost men to injuries that a skilled nurse could have treated. But it's more than that. He faced me fully, and his voice dropped, becoming more personal. I've been looking for a long time for someone with substance. Someone with strength and courage. He allowed himself that small smile again. Someone who'd break a man's nose with a bedpan rather than surrender her honor. And with that, he was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind him. I sat staring at the closed door, the heavy coat still wrapped around me, his scent clinging to it. I had come west expecting hardship, expecting loneliness, expecting a struggle to survive. I had never in my wildest imaginings expected to meet a man like Sterling Monroe. A millionaire rancher, they'd called him. A man of immense wealth who possessed an even greater measure of kindness. I looked at the borrowed clothes, a simple but beautifully made dress of deep blue wool, soft undergarments, thick stockings, and a pair of sturdy boots that looked as if they might just fit. As I stripped off my own damp, travel-stained garments, a fragile spark of hope, brighter and warmer than the fire in the hearth, began to glow within me. I had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time since that terrible day in Philadelphia, I felt it was a day worth meeting. The sunlight that streamed through the hotel window the next morning was dazzling, reflecting off a world blanketed in pristine, silent snow. The blizzard had passed, leaving behind a clean, cold beauty. I had slept in the massive bed as if drugged a deep, restorative sleep free from the nightmares that had plagued me for months. I felt reborn. A soft, polite knock at the door brought me fully awake. "Miss Vance, it's Sterling Monroe." One moment I called, my voice clear and rested. I quickly braided my long dark hair and smoothed the soft wool of the borrowed dress. When I opened the door, he stood there holding a large breakfast tray, a warm, genuine smile on his face that made my heart give a surprising little flutter. "Good morning," he said. "I thought you might have an appetite. How are you feeling?" "I feel like a new woman," I admitted, stepping back to allow him inside. "Mr. Monroe, I can't possibly repay you for all." "Sterling," he corrected, gently setting the tray on a small table by the sunlit window. "And you owe me nothing, although," he added, his eyes twinkling, "I was hoping we might discuss your future plans now that you've thawed." We sat opposite each other and I ate with an appetite that astonished me. Eggs, thick sliced bacon, fluffy biscuits with fresh butter and jam. It was a feast, and I realized with a pang just how long it had been since I'd had a truly satisfying meal. As for plans, I said, dabbing my lips with a linen napkin, they are rather unformed. I had intended to find my way to one of the mining camps. I heard they are desperate for anyone with medical knowledge. Sterling leaned back, his expression turning serious as he studied me. "The mining camps are no place for a woman on her own, Ellie." "May I call you Ellie?" I nodded, and he continued. "They are rough, dangerous places. The men are hard-working, but they are also starved for the company of a respectable woman, and not all of them remember their manners." "I can handle myself," I said, a touch of pride in my voice. "I have no doubt you can," he agreed with a nod. "You've already proven that. But there may be a better option. A safer one." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "My ranch, the Starfall, is a significant operation. We cover nearly 50,000 acres. I employ 60 men year-round, and that number nearly doubles during roundup and branding season. These men are engaged in dangerous work. Broken bones, deep cuts, burned snake bites. We see it all." I set down my coffee cup, my full attention on him. My heart began to beat a little faster. "Are you offering me employment, Mr. Monroe?" "Sterling," he reminded me again with a gentle smile. "And yes, I am. I'm offering you a formal position as the ranch's resident nurse. I would provide you with comfortable private quarters, a generous salary, and a budget to order any medical supplies you require. You would have your own cabin just a short walk from the main house. Our cook Jed and his wife Martha would see to it you were always well fed." It sounded too good to be true, a fantasy spun from my deepest desperation. There had to be a catch. "And what would you expect from me in return for this?" "Generosity," I asked, my tone guarded. His expression grew serious once more. "I would expect honest work for honest pay. I would expect you to tend to my men when they are injured, to assist with difficult births among the livestock if you're able, and perhaps to teach the men some basic principles of first aid. Nothing more." His gaze was direct, unwavering. "And you would expect nothing personal from me?" The unspoken question hung in the air between us. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Ellie," he said, his voice soft but firm, "I want to be perfectly clear. I am not the kind of man who would leverage a woman's difficult circumstances for my own advantage. I would never presume. If anything of a personal nature were to ever develop between us, it would be because it was a mutual desire born of respect and affection, not because you felt any sense of obligation. Your position would be based solely on your professional merit." I searched his face, my lifetime of hard-learned caution warring with the instinct that told me this man was honorable. I saw nothing but sincerity in his clear, dark eyes. Everything in his conduct since finding me had been that of a perfect gentleman. "How far is your ranch?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. 20 miles north of here. It's called the Starfall. We raise prime cattle and breed fine horses. The work is hard, but it's honest, and the men who ride for me are good, decent folk." "You said you've been looking for a healer. Have you not tried to hire a doctor?" Sterling let out a short, humorless laugh. "I've tried for years. I've placed advertisements in newspapers from Denver to Kansas City. Most doctors, it seems, prefer the comforts of a town practice, treating wealthy merchants and their families. Life on a remote ranch is too rough, the work too uncertain, and the profits not high enough for their tastes." "But you would hire a woman," I pressed. "I would hire a three-headed Martian if they had the skill and the courage to do the job," he stated plainly. "Out here, Ellie, we care about what a person can do. The rest is just noise. I considered his offer. It was a lifeline, a miracle I hadn't dared to pray for, but my skepticism, that hard shell I had grown to protect myself, remained. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked directly. He smiled a genuine smile of appreciation. "You're as sharp as you are skilled. I like that." He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "All right, here is the unvarnished truth. The Starfall is a working ranch, not a gentleman's country estate. The winters are brutal, the summers are scorching. As I said, we're 20 miles from the nearest town, which means 20 miles from any society or entertainment. Aside from Martha, who helps in the cookhouse, you would be the only woman on the property most of the time. It can be a lonely existence. I have known a profound loneliness in a city teeming with millions of people," I said quietly. "The loneliness of a ranch sounds far more honest. There's something else," he continued, his gaze steady. "I am not just a rancher. My family has considerable wealth. My father built a shipping empire before the war, and I've been fortunate with my own investments separate from the ranch. I'm telling you this because people will talk. They might say you're an opportunist, a woman who saw a chance to snare a wealthy husband." My chin came up, a spark of my old fire returning. "Let them say it. I know my own heart, and I know my intentions. Their whispers cannot harm me. I believe you do," he said softly, his voice full of a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun streaming through the window. "But it was only fair that you know what you might be walking into." A comfortable silence fell between us. I looked out the window at the snow-covered street, at the promise of a new day, a new life. It was a terrifying, exhilarating prospect. Finally, I turned back to him. "When would you need me to begin?" His entire face lit up. The smile that transformed his rugged features was so radiant, it stole my breath. "Does this mean you're accepting the position?" "It means I will try," I said, my voice cautious but firm. "On the condition that if this arrangement proves unsuitable for either of us, I am free to move on with no hard feelings." "Fair enough," he said, standing and extending his hand across the table. "Welcome to the Starfall, Nurse Vance." I placed my hand in his. His grip was strong and warm, engulfing my own. A jolt, a current of unexpected energy passed between us. I saw in his eyes that he had felt it too. This new chapter of my life was going to be far more complicated than a simple employment contract. But as I looked at the man who had pulled me from the brink of despair, I felt not fear but a thrilling, unfamiliar sense of anticipation for the future. The journey to the Starfall Ranch was an immersion into a world of staggering raw beauty. Sterling had insisted on outfitting me properly in Cheyenne, purchasing a warm sheepskin-lined coat, sturdy riding boots, and other necessities. When I protested the expense, he simply waved my objections away. "Consider it a signing bonus and an advance on your salary," he'd said with that disarming grin. Now riding a gentle mare alongside him, the sheer scale of the Wyoming wilderness left me speechless. The land rolled on forever, a vast sea of white, under an achingly blue sky, with the jagged snow-capped peaks of distant mountains scratching at the heavens. This was a land that did not care for the small dramas of men. It was ancient, powerful, and magnificent. As we rode, Sterling pointed out landmarks, his voice filled with a deep love for this harsh country. We crossed a frozen creek where his cattle would water in the summer, and passed through a grove of cottonwood trees whose bare branches clawed at the sky. Finally, he reined in his stallion at the crest of a high ridge. "There she is," he said, a quiet pride resonating in his voice. "Starfall." I drew in a sharp breath. The sight below was not just a ranch. It was a small, self-contained kingdom sprawling across a sheltered valley. A large, handsome main house built of sturdy logs and river stone stood as the centerpiece, its wide front porch promising welcome. Radiating out from it were a long bunkhouse, massive stables, corrals, a blacksmith shop clanging with activity, and a dozen other outbuildings. Plumes of smoke rose from several chimneys, a sign of life and warmth in the vast cold. Men on horseback moved with purpose across the yard. "It's breathtaking," I said, the word inadequate. "You should see it in the spring," he replied, his eyes soft with memory. "When the valley is green and the wildflowers are in bloom, it's the prettiest place on God's earth." As we rode down into the ranch yard, men began to emerge from the buildings, their curiosity piqued. They tipped their hats as Sterling passed, their gazes lingering on me. "Boys," Sterling called out, his voice carrying easily in the crisp air as he dismounted. "I'd like you all to meet Miss Eleanor Vance. She'll be our new nurse." A spontaneous cheer went up from the assembled cowboys. It was a sound of genuine, heartfelt relief. I felt a blush rise to my cheeks, unaccustomed to being the center of such positive attention. An older man with a kind weathered face and a thick gray mustache stepped forward. "Name Silas Croft, ma'am." "I'm the foreman," he said, his voice gruff but respectful. "I can't tell you what a comfort it is to have someone with proper medical training here. Welcome to Starfall." "Thank you, Mr. Croft," I said as Sterling helped me down from my horse. "I'll do my best to be of service." "Oh, you will be," another man chimed in, holding up a hand wrapped in a dirty bandage, "tangled with some barbed wire yesterday. Stings like the devil." "I'll take a look at that as soon as I'm settled," I promised, already feeling the familiar pull of my vocation. Sterling led me toward a small, charming cabin set about 50 yards from the main house, offering both privacy and proximity. "This will be your home," he said, opening the door and stepping aside for me to enter. The cabin was perfect. A fire was already blazing in the stone fireplace, filling the main room with a warm, welcoming glow. The room was simply but comfortably furnished, serving as a living area and an office. Beyond it, I could see a small, cozy bedroom and a kitchen, its pantry already stocked. "Jed's wife, Martha, got everything ready for you," Sterling explained. "If there's anything at all you need, you have only to ask." I walked through the small space, running my hand over the smooth pine of the tabletop, looking out the windows. One framed a magnificent view of the mountains, the other looked out over the bustling heart of the ranch. It felt more like a home than any place I had ever lived. "There's one more thing," Sterling said, a hint of excitement in his voice. He led me to a door I hadn't noticed. "I thought you'd be needing this." He opened it and my breath caught in my throat. It was a fully equipped medical infirmary. An examination table stood in the center of the room. Glass-fronted cabinets were filled with medicines, bandages, and supplies. Trays of gleaming surgical instruments were laid out clean and organized. It was more comprehensive, better stocked than the dispensary at the hospital in Philadelphia. "Sterling," I breathed, turning to him, my eyes filling with tears I could not stop. The sheer, overwhelming generosity of it, the profound respect for my profession it represented, was too much to bear. This must have cost a fortune." "A good healer is priceless," he said, simply, his gaze warm. "Besides, I ordered most of it months ago on the faith that I would find the right person to use it. After months of feeling worthless, of being discarded and slandered, this gesture of faith and kindness undid me." "Thank you," I whispered the words, feeling utterly inadequate. "Don't thank me yet," he said with that easy smile. "Wait until you see the creative ways some of these boys can find to get themselves hurt. You'll earn every penny." As if on cue, a knock sounded at the cabin door. Silas Croft entered, helping a young cowboy who was grimacing in pain and hopping on one foot. "Sorry to disturb you so soon, ma'am," the foreman said, "but young Billy Ray here had a disagreement with his horse. The horse won." "Bring him in," I said, the nurse in me taking over instantly, my personal emotions receding. "Into the medical room. Let's get that boot off and see the damage." As I knelt to examine the young man's bruised and swelling foot, badly sprained but thankfully not broken, I was aware of Sterling watching me from the doorway. When I finished bandaging the injury and giving Billy Ray firm instructions for its care, I looked up and met Sterling's gaze. He was smiling, a look of deep satisfaction on his face. "What?" I asked, a little self-consciously. "Nothing," he said, his voice soft. "Just a feeling that this is going to work out even better than I had hoped." Later that evening, after treating 2 more minor injuries and being formally introduced to most of the ranch hands, I sat by the fire in my own cabin, trying to absorb the dizzying turn my life had taken. 48 hours ago, I had been destitute, alone, and preparing to die. Now I had a home of vital purpose and the respect of an entire community. And then there was Sterling Monroe. He was a puzzle I was only beginning to understand, a man of wealth who wore it as comfortably and unpretentiously as his worn leather gloves. A man of authority who was gentle and protective. A man who treated me as a respected professional and equal. A soft knock at my door startled me from my reverie. I opened it to find Sterling standing on the porch, 2 steaming mugs in his hands. "Martha's hot chocolate," he said by way of explanation. "She claims it can cure anything from a broken heart to a snake bite. Thought you might like to test the theory." "That's very thoughtful," I said, accepting the warm mug. Would you like to come in for a moment?" He hesitated. "I wouldn't want to compromise your reputation, Ellie." A small smile touched my lips. "I think my reputation can withstand a brief chaperoned conversation with my employer. Besides, who is there to gossip out here but the coyotes?" He smiled back and stepped inside, taking the chair opposite mine by the fire. The hot chocolate was divine, rich and dark and warming to the soul. "How are you settling in?" he asked. "Far better than I ever dared to hope," I admitted. "The men are polite, this cabin is a dream, and that infirmary, Sterling, it's a testament to your character." He seemed to deflect the praise, his gaze turning to the fire. A troubled look crossed his features. "What is it?" I asked gently. "I need to be fully honest with you about something," he said, turning to face me. "When I found you at that station, it wasn't entirely by chance." I set my mug down, a flicker of my old wariness returning. "What do you mean?" I had been in town on business, that was true. But my primary purpose was to make inquiries about finding a doctor or a nurse for the ranch. I had spoken to Mr. Abernathy at the hotel, and he mentioned that a woman with a medical bag had been asking about work earlier in the day, but that he'd had to turn her away from the boarding house. "I went to the station hoping I might find you before you left town." "So you knew who I was?" "I knew a trained nurse from the East was in Cheyenne, and in dire straits," he clarified. "I didn't know your name or the full extent of your circumstances until I met you. I didn't tell you this before because I wanted you to accept the position on its own merits, not out of a sense of gratitude or obligation to the man who rescued you." His reasoning was sound, and his honesty only deepened my respect for him. "Is there anything else I should know?" He met my eyes, his gaze direct and intense. "Only this. I find myself very attracted to you, Ellie. I think I have been from the moment I saw you sitting on that bench looking so defiant even in your despair. But I give you my word that your position here is secure regardless of your personal feelings for me. I will never pressure you. Your job depends on your skill and nothing else." My heart did a somersault in my chest. The attraction was powerful and undeniable, and it was mutual. His straightforward, honorable declaration made it safe to acknowledge. "Thank you for your honesty, Sterling," I said softly. "And, for the record, the attraction is not one-sided." We looked at each other across the warm, crackling space, the air thick with unspoken possibilities. We both knew that something significant was beginning, but we also knew the wisdom of letting it unfold slowly, carefully. "Well," he said, standing abruptly, "I should let you get your rest. You've had an eventful couple of days." "Sterling," I called as he reached the door. "Thank you for everything. I haven't felt this hopeful in a very long time." He paused and looked back at me, his face silhouetted against the night. "Neither have I, Ellie," he said quietly. "Neither have I." He was gone, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the warm glow of a future that for the first time felt bright with promise. Spring arrived in a rush of vibrant life, melting the snow and painting the valley in breathtaking shades of green. I settled into the rhythm of the Starfall ranch as if I had been born to it. My days were full. I treated the Cowboy's injuries, which were as varied and frequent as Sterling had predicted. I splinted broken limbs, stitched deep gashes, and dispensed remedies for everything from mountain fever to indigestion. I found a surprising satisfaction in tending the livestock, as well successfully delivering twin foals during a late spring storm, and helping Jed and Martha cultivate a sprawling kitchen garden. The Cowboys, initially shy and overly formal, soon came to treat me as one of their own. They called me Doc Ellie with a mixture of respect and affection, and they sought my counsel on matters that had nothing to do with medicine, from writing letters home to mending broken hearts. I had found more than a job. I had found a community, a family. But it was my evolving relationship with Sterling that occupied the quiet corners of my heart. He was meticulously professional during the day, treating me with the formal respect due the ranch's nurse. But our evenings became an unspoken ritual. He would appear on my porch as dusk settled over the mountains, often with 2 cups of coffee or a shared piece of Martha's pie. We would talk for hours, our conversations weaving a tapestry of trust and intimacy. He spoke of his dreams for the ranch, his deep connection to the land. I, in turn, found myself opening up about my life in Philadelphia, the joys and the sorrows, sharing stories I had never told another soul. One evening in late April, as we sat on the porch swing watching the setting sun bleed gold and purple across the sky, Sterling's mood turned somber. "Ellie, there's a part of my past I need to tell you about," he said, his voice unusually grave. I stilled the gentle motion of the swing and gave him my full attention. "What is it, Sterling?" "I was married before," he said quietly, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. A sharp, unexpected pang of jealousy shot through me, followed by a wave of guilt. Of course, a man like him would have had a wife. It was foolish to think otherwise. "What happened to her?" I asked softly. "Her name was Clara," he said, the name a soft sigh on his lips. "We grew up on neighboring ranches in Texas. Married when I was 22. We were happy." He paused, the pain of the memory still raw. "A fever took her 5 years ago. We had been trying for a child, but it wasn't meant to be. When I lost her, I thought I'd lost my capacity for happiness along with her. I sold my land in Texas and came here to Wyoming to build something new, to lose myself in the work. "I'm so sorry, Sterling," I said, instinctively reaching out to place my hand over his. His hand was warm and strong, and he turned it over to intertwine his fingers with mine. "She was a good woman," he continued, "but she was nothing like you, Ellie. Clara was gentle, delicate. She loved her garden and her needlepoint. She would have been terrified by the life you've embraced here." He turned to look at me, his eyes full of an emotion that made my breath catch. "You're strong. You're brave. You face every challenge head-on without flinching. I love that about you." My heart stopped. The three words hung in the air between us, potent and terrifying and wonderful. "Ellie, I know this is fast," he said, his words rushing out now. "I know our situation is complicated, but I can't keep pretending that my feelings for you are merely those of a grateful employer. They are so much more than that." "Mine aren't either," I confessed, my voice trembling slightly. "But you're right, it is complicated. The men, people in town. I don't give a damn what anyone thinks," he said fiercely, his grip on my hand tightening. "I only care what you think, what you feel." Before I could find the words to respond, the spell was shattered. Silas Croft came running toward the cabin, his face ashen in the twilight. "Boss, Doc Ellie," he yelled, breathing hard. "There's been an accident. A lightning strike spooked a herd down in the south pasture. Young Billy Ray. He was trampled. He's hurt bad, real bad." In an instant, my personal turmoil vanished, replaced by the cold, clear focus of the nurse. I was on my feet, pulling my hand from Sterling's. "Where is he?" "The boys are bringing him to the bunkhouse now," Silas replied. I didn't wait for another word, running for the infirmary to grab my bag while Sterling and Silas raced to the bunkhouse. The scene that greeted me was one of controlled chaos. The young cowboy Billy Ray lay on a makeshift bed of blankets on the floor, his face pale and beaded with sweat, his breathing shallow and ragged. A quick examination confirmed my worst fears: multiple broken ribs, a probable punctured lung, and clear signs of severe internal bleeding. "We have to get the doctor from Cheyenne," one of the cowboys said anxiously. I looked at Billy Ray's fading vitality and knew with chilling certainty that a ride to Cheyenne and back would be a death sentence. "He won't survive the wait," I said, my voice sharp with authority. "Clear off that big table in the center of the room. I need light as much as you can find. And I need boiling water, clean sheets, and whiskey for anesthetic and for sterilizing." I looked at Silas, whose face was a mask of worry. "Silas, I'm going to need you to assist me, and I need 2 men to hold him steady." "Doc Ellie," Silas said, his voice full of doubt. "Are you sure? This is major surgery." "I'm sure of this," I said, meeting his gaze with an intensity that left no room for argument. "If we wait, he dies. If I operate now, he has a chance. I've performed this procedure before under a surgeon's supervision. Now are you going to help me save this boy's life?" For the next 3 hours, the bunkhouse transformed into a makeshift operating theater, under the flickering light of a dozen lanterns, with the rough cowboys watching in awed silence. I worked to repair the terrible damage inside Billy Ray's chest. I was no longer Ellie Vance, the woman with a complicated past and a burgeoning love affair. I was a surgeon, a healer, my hands moving with a skill and confidence that felt guided by some higher power. When I finally tied off the last suture and stepped back, my entire body shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline, Billy Ray's breathing was deeper, more regular. The deadly pallor had receded from his skin. "He's going to live," I announced to the room, my voice hoarse. The bunkhouse erupted in a roar of cheers and relieved cries. I hadn't realized that Sterling had returned until I saw him standing in the doorway. He had ridden for the doctor as a precaution, and the man stood beside him now, looking on. Sterling's face was a canvas of emotions, awe, pride, and a look of such profound love that it made my knees weak. Later, after the doctor from Cheyenne had examined my work and pronounced it as fine as any he could have done himself, and after Billy Ray had been moved to the cabin next to mine for close observation, Sterling and I finally had a moment, alone. We sat on my porch steps, the moon casting a silver glow over the silent ranch. "What you did in there tonight, Ellie," Sterling said, his voice thick with emotion. "It was a miracle. You saved him." "It's my training," I said, deflecting the praise, though my heart swelled at his words. "No," he said, turning to face me, taking both of my hands in his. "It was you. Your courage, your skill, your heart. It's why I love you, Ellie Vance." There it was again, not spoken in haste, but declared with the weight of absolute certainty. I looked into the eyes of this incredible man who had saved me in every way. A person could be saved who had given me a home, a purpose, and now his heart. "I love you too, Sterling Monroe," I said, the words feeling as natural and true as breathing. He leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't a kiss of desperate passion, but one of deep, soulful connection, a promise made under the vast, star-filled Wyoming sky. When he pulled back, his eyes were shining. "Marry me, Ellie," he whispered. "I know it's fast. I know our lives just collided a few short months ago. But I can't imagine a single day of the rest of my life without you by my side." He held up a hand before I could speak. "You don't have to answer me now. Just promise me you'll think about it." "I will," I promised him, my voice choked with happy tears. But in my heart, I already knew the answer. My journey was over. I was home. The news of Sterling's proposal spread through the Starfall like a warm spring wind. To my quiet surprise, the reaction from the Cowboys was one of universal enthusiastic approval. They had already adopted me as their Doc Ellie, and they seemed to believe that my happiness was intrinsically linked to their bosses. "Never seen the boss man so light on his feet," Silas Croft told me one morning as I changed the dressings on Billy Ray's healing incisions. "You're good for him, ma'am. You're good for this whole ranch." We planned the wedding for the first Saturday in June, when the wildflowers were at their peak. It became the most anticipated social event in that corner of the territory. People came from all over, ranchers from neighboring spreads, the townsfolk of Cheyenne, and even some of Sterling's stern-faced business partners from Denver, their curiosity about the rancher's nurse bride palpable. Sterling had a dress of ivory silk brought all the way from San Francisco for me. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever owned. Martha, her eyes shining with tears, wove a crown of blue and yellow prairie flowers into my hair. When I looked at my reflection, I saw not the haunted, desperate woman from the train station, but a bride radiant and full of hope. Silas Croft, looking proud and uncomfortable in his Sunday, best insisted on walking me down the makeshift aisle, a path cleared between the main house and the bunkhouse lined with every man from the ranch. At the end of the path, on the wide front porch of the house that would become our home, Sterling waited. He looked magnificent in a fine black suit, but I could see the nervous tension in his shoulders. Then our eyes met, and all his anxiety seemed to melt away, replaced by a smile of such pure, unadulterated joy that it took my breath away. The circuit preacher's words about partnership, about finding shelter in each other through sickness and health for richer or poorer, felt as though they had been written specifically for us. "Do you, Sterling Thomas Monroe, take this woman, Eleanor Rose Vance, to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." Sterling's voice boomed strong and clear, echoing across the valley. "And do you, Eleanor Rose Vance, take this man, Sterling Thomas Monroe, to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," I replied, my voice steady and sure, filled with all the love in my heart. When the preacher pronounced us husband and wife, Sterling's kiss was deep and passionate, drawing a chorus of cheers and whistles from the Cowboys. I blushed, but I did not pull away. I was his and he was mine, and I wanted the whole world to know it. The celebration that followed was the stuff of legend. Jed and Martha had prepared a feast fit for royalty. There was music from a fiddle and a banjo and dancing that went on long into the night. But the moment that touched me most deeply was when Billy Ray Cobb, leaning on a cane but with the color back in his cheeks, stood to offer a toast. "To Mrs. Thornton," he said, his young voice cracking with emotion as he raised a glass of lemonade, "the woman who saved my life, and who made our boss the happiest man in Wyoming. May your story be told around campfires for 100 years to come." Later, as the guests began to depart, and a quiet peace settled over the ranch, Sterling and I stood alone on the porch. "Well, Mrs. Monroe," he said, taking my hands in his, "how does it feel?" "It feels," I said, looking up at his beloved face, "like every broken piece of my life has finally been put back together, creating something more beautiful than I ever could have imagined." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a beautiful gold locket on a delicate chain. He fastened it around my neck, his fingers warm against my skin. "Open it," he urged. Inside, one half held a tiny, perfect photograph of the two of us taken just after the ceremony. Engraved on the other half were 3 simple words: forever and always. "Now you'll always have me close to your heart," he whispered. "I already did," I replied, and I drew his head down for another kiss, sealing our promise under the vast, silent, and watchful Wyoming sky. The years that followed were rich and full. My life, intertwined with Sterling's and the Starfall Ranch, became as much a part of me as my own heartbeat. I continued my work as a healer, but now my domain extended far beyond the ranch's borders. With Sterling's unwavering support and funding, we established the territory's first proper hospital in Cheyenne, a clean, modern facility with 20 beds and its own operating theater. I started a nursing school attached to it, training young women with the same grit and compassion that the frontier demanded. My name, once whispered in slander, was now spoken with respect in medical journals back east. Sterling, for his part, became a force in the territory's development, serving in the legislature and using his wealth and influence to bring railroads and responsible industry to Wyoming, always with an eye toward preserving the wild beauty we both loved. Our love story became a piece of local folklore, a tale of hope and second chances that people told their children. But our greatest joy, our most profound accomplishment, was our family. Our twin boys, Thomas and Jackson Jr., were born in 1890, both with their father's dark hair and my determined chin. 2 years later, our daughter arrived, a beautiful, serene baby we named Clara Rose, a tribute to the woman who had first held Sterling's heart. Our happiness, however, was not to remain unchallenged. The past has a long shadow, and in the spring of 1889 that shadow fell across the Starfall. A telegram arrived from Cheyenne warning us that a doctor, Alistair Finch from Philadelphia, was in town making inquiries about my practice and claiming to be an investigator for a new medical standards board. "He's come to destroy me," I said to Sterling, the telegram trembling in my hand. The old fear, cold and familiar, coiled in my stomach. "He's never forgiven me." "Let him come, Sterling," said his face hardening into a mask of cold fury. "He will find that Wyoming is not Philadelphia, and you are not a frightened girl he can bully. You are Mrs. Sterling Monroe, and you are the most respected healer in this territory." Finch arrived 3 days later, accompanied by a nervous territorial marshal. He was just as I remembered, thin, sallow, with cruel, calculating eyes behind his spectacles. "Mrs. Monroe," he began with a sneer, deliberately mispronouncing the name. Or should I say Miss Vance? "I am here to investigate reports of your illegal and unlicensed practice of medicine." "My wife is a highly trained nurse," Sterling said, stepping in front of me, a formidable protective wall of strength. "She has certificates to prove her qualifications." "Certificates that are rendered meaningless by a dismissal for moral turpitude," Finch retorted smoothly. "Did you ever tell your powerful husband about your behavior back in Philadelphia, my dear?" I told him I defended myself against a coward who got his nose broken for his trouble, I said, my voice ringing with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "Your word against that of a respected physician," Finch scoffed. He never finished the sentence. Sterling's fist shot out a single swift motion that connected with Finch's jaw and sent him sprawling into the dust of the ranch yard. The marshal fumbled for his weapon but froze when he found himself surrounded by 30 grim-faced cowboys who had materialized from every corner of the ranch, their loyalty to me absolute. "I am a citizen of this territory," Sterling said, his voice dangerously calm. "You want to question my wife's credentials? Then we will have a proper public hearing in Cheyenne." The hearing was a spectacle. The courthouse was packed with people from every walk of life. Ranchers, miners, shopkeepers, mothers whose babies I had delivered, all there to support me. One by one they testified to my skill, my compassion, my tireless work. The doctor from Cheyenne spoke eloquently about the lives I had saved, including Billy Ray Cobb's. The territorial governor himself sent a letter read aloud to the court praising my contributions. Finch's accusations crumbled into dust. His own history of incompetence and drunkenness was brought to light. The judge, a stern man with an unyielding sense of frontier justice, delivered his verdict without hesitation. "Mrs. Monroe," he declared, his voice booming through the silent courtroom, "your service to this territory has been nothing short of heroic. Your credentials are hereby officially recognized by this government. As for you, Dr. Finch," he said, fixing the man with a withering glare, "I suggest you leave Wyoming immediately before these good people decide to administer their own brand of justice." The courtroom erupted. Sterling swept me into his arms, spinning me around as cheers echoed around us. "It's over," he whispered into my hair. "He can never hurt you again." We faced him together, I cried, looking up at him through tears of joy. "We can face anything together." And we did. We lived a long, full life on the ranch we loved, watching our children and then our grandchildren grow. We saw Wyoming achieve statehood, a dream Sterling had worked tirelessly for. The Starfall Ranch thrived, the hospital in Cheyenne grew, and the town of Thornton, which we founded for our employees, became a beacon of prosperity and community. Sterling passed from this world in the winter of 1923 at the age of 86. He died peacefully in our bed, his hand in mine. 3 months later, I followed him. My heart, it seemed, simply could not bear to beat without his nearby. We were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the valley, under the vast Wyoming sky that had witnessed the start of our life together. Our children chose the inscription for our shared headstone, the words from the locket he had given me on our wedding day, forever and always. They say our story became a legend, a testament to the enduring power of love, kindness, and the untamed spirit of the American West. But for me, it was always simpler than that. It was the story of a man with a compassionate heart, who found a half-frozen woman at a train station and in saving her saved himself. It was the story of how a single act of kindness can change not just 2 lives, but the course of history itself. Enjoying these epic Wild West stories? Hit subscribe for more gripping tales of bravery, conflict, and unexpected heroes. Now tap the video on screen to experience a story with a twist you'll never forget.